بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I pray to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala that everyone is well today, that everyone is in a state of al-afiyah, and that is the best thing you can ask for in this world. That Allah gives you al-afiyah fi ad-din wa ad-dunya wal-akhirah. That Allah gives you well-being in your religion, in your worldly matters, and in the hereafter. I would drive with one of my teachers, and I noticed that every time he would encounter someone, he would say to them, "May Allah give you afiyah. May Allah give you afiyah." It was like a constant dua that he would make. May Allah give you afiyah. And the Prophet mentioned that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when we ask for in this world, we ask for al-afiyah, well-being. And for the hereafter, we ask for Jannatul Firdaus, right? That high rank in paradise. But I wanted to continue what we talked about yesterday. Yesterday morning, we were talking about dalil, that baseball bat word that has become today. Proof, right? I don't know, maybe in our areas, what's your dalil, akh? Where's your proof? And I'm going to tell you something. All the time I spent studying, and I've been around, honestly, I've been around a lot of people, right? I've seen great, knowledgeable scholars in my life. And I listened to lectures of great scholars. They don't talk like that. They just don't, right? And they have dalil for everything they be talking about or they say, but it's not like a baseball bat, right? And I would like to kind of put that in some context. Something Sheikh Samir told me one time. You know, when you're around real knowledgeable people, they're normal. Real knowledgeable people are normal. When you're around them, you won't know that they're knowledgeable. If you spend time with them, you won't realize how knowledgeable they are. You will only realize how knowledgeable they are when you get a portion of knowledge. In other words, they don't wear their knowledge as some badge on their sleeve or on their arm. Rather, they are very practical. So one day, I was talking to Sheikh Samir, and we were talking about one of his sheikhs, but it's really the sheikh of his father. His name was Sheikh Ahmed al-Harun. He was one of the biggest knowers of Allah in Syria. In all of Sham, he was like Arif Billah, right? A Sheikh Ahmed al-Harun. And he had a lot of karamat, extraordinary miracles. So one day, and I read some of the stuff about him, and it was just like, he seemed very simple. He was a big knower of Allah. So Sheikh Samir said to me about that, about growing up in that environment in his house. He said, we lived at Tasawwuf, Sufism, before we knew its name. I said, deep. Hear that? He said, we lived at Tasawwuf before we knew its name. And I noticed from being in the company of my teachers, we lived the proof before we even knew what a proof was. We practiced the proofs before we ever knew what the proofs were. And that's how it's supposed to work. Evidences are lived in practice before they are known. Not the opposite way. You learn all the proofs and then you practice. Do you realize that? Let's make sure we all on the same page. Do all y'all realize that? You live and practice the proof before you know it. Does everyone know that? Don't all speak at once. No, I'm joking. Okay. Did y'all hear me? Are y'all sleepy or am I sleepy? Or the computers are going slow? I like interaction. Okay. Right. So I said that you live and practice the proof before you know it. What's the proof for that? What's the proof for that? What's your dalil act in ucht? What's the proof for that? Give me the proof. From your side, tell me the proof. Since it's so clear and you understand, give me the proof. What's your dalil? Good. Serve Saifullah. Right? Salah. That's your proof. Right? You all pray, and if I ask you the proof for everything you do in Salat, I guarantee you not one of you could give it. You can't. Even some of you who followed Albany's The Prophet's Prayer Described, pray as you see me pray. Even with that, you still don't know the proof for everything you do. But you pray 5 times a day. Right? So what you know from your own life is that you practice. And how do you learn that practice? Someone taught you how to pray. Someone taught you how to pray. Right? And that person who taught you how to pray, you trusted them that they knew what they were doing. And then you observed when you learned how to pray that everybody around you does the same thing. You follow? Everyone does that. And then you know from that, this has to be right because everybody around me does it. I go to the Masjid, everyone prays like this. Everyone does this. This is the way it's done. Everywhere I travel, after a while, you begin to know that this is how it's done. And then as you learn, you start to learn why it's done this way. There's how you get to your proof. That's how Islam works. All right. Now this is my test for you to see about proof, to give you some things why Dalil, when someone says that, it is a sign that they're not following scholarship, which is a problem, and they're about to ruin the religion, which is the end result of that problem. Following scholarship is what Allah ordered us to do in the Quran. Allah said, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know, right? So that entails following the people of knowledge. So in Islam, we talked about yesterday, the basic proofs are Al-Quran, meaning the verses of the Quran, and the Sunnah, meaning the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ that make up the Sunnah. Tell you. The verses of the Quran are obvious, right? Because you have one book of the Quran and then you have verses. When we talk about proof, we must understand the different types of verses in the Quran. Because when you say proof, you're asking about legal rulings. You do realize that, right? So I say, what's your dalil? They're obviously talking about an evidence for a legal ruling. You're doing this, so what's your dalil? What's the evidence that this is a valid thing to do in the religion? My question to you, are all the verses in the Quran evidences for legal rulings? That's a question. are all the verses in the Quran evidences, dalil, for legal rulings? I'm not just going to give you, we got to think this out, right, together. So that means no. So just because someone quotes a verse of the Quran, even though he uses, he said, I said no with no proof. Even though someone quotes a Quranic verse, and since you said that all the verses of the Quran are not proofs for legal rulings, then that means just quoting a verse from the Quran in and of itself is not a dalil, right? It's not a proof. Because it is possible, since all the verses of the Quran are not evidences for legal rulings, then you may quote a verse for a legal ruling that is not a evidence for a legal ruling, if you don't know the difference. Did you follow what I said? I'm going slow so that we're all following each other, because I'm going to build up to something, and it's going to be complicated, yet simplistic if you follow. But if I just start talking, you're going to be confused. I'm going to go over your head, so I don't want to go over your head. So I'm going to talk slow, and we're going to engage each other, and you'll follow. And then when I talk about more complex things, you'll understand. So I want you to follow me, so I need the engagement. And I'm not going to rush through it because it's important. So y'all with me, right? So from what we understood here is that I remember someone in the discussion, he said, I gave you call Allah Ta'ala. I gave you Allah said. I said, I heard what you said, but that's not an evidence from what you're using it for. It doesn't apply. So what you said, Allah did say that, but what you took from it is totally wrong. It doesn't apply for what you're talking about at all. So you use it as a proof, but it is not a proof. It's not a proof at all from what you're talking about. It's not a dalil. Right? So follow that. So now the question, roughly, how many verses in the Quran are verses of legal rulings? In other words, the Quran has over 6,000 verses. How many of those verses are ayatul ahkam? They are verses related to legal rulings. That's a question. Does anyone know? Question. Come on. Okay. All right, that's one answer, but it got question marks, so that's not definitive. Shaquille, I thought you the Sheikh of Turkey. What you mean, no idea? I haven't heard, no idea. No, no, no. Come on. Nobody? There's a lot of people in here. And that's what kills me, right? And I love y'all. Now I'm going to all right, put my Imam hat to the side, and I'm brother, right? I'm brother. When we be kicking it, everybody's a shake till the questions come. Everybody's a shake until the questions come. Then the shake just go out of the window. Okay, free slave. How many verses in the Quran, roughly, are ayatul ahkam? They are verses of legal rulings, for legal rulings. That was the question. Isa, why? I'm confused. Why would we expect it to know that? Well, you asking for proof, you should know what a proof is. Or you shouldn't be asking. If a person said, give me your dalil, that means you're in the field of extracting evidences. So if you don't know what the evidence is, why are you asking about something you don't know? So Malika, you're right. About 500. So out of those 6,000 and some odd verses, right? Over 6,000 verses, only around 500 of them relate to legal rulings, right? So write that in your notes, right? Roughly around 500. All right, so the next question will follow. What about the other verses? The other 6,000 verses besides those 500, what type of verses are they? That's a question. Because that's only, you said that's not a lot of verses. You're talking only around 500 verses that are for legal rulings and judgments. What about the rest of the Quran? What are they about? Hmm? Okay, warnings, glad tidings, that's true. Go ahead. Muhkamat? No, that doesn't mean that. Mm-mm. Calling to Tawheed. No clear verses and allegorical verses. No, that's not it. But they are verses like that. Admonitions, glad tidings, warnings. What else? Come on, you read the Quran. Looking at the signs of nature. Yeah, what else? Y'all forgetting the biggest, a big portion of Quranic verses that y'all not mentioning. Historical knowledge. What you mean by that, Fatima? That's true. History of man. That's true. Well, the Quran is revelations. Y'all read the Quran all Ramadan. Come on. Y'all read a lot of the Quran. You should be answering this. Lessons of past people. What else? A big portion of the Quran. Past prophets. Stories of the prophets. Stories of previous nations. Paradise. Hellfire. All that stuff is mentioned in the Quran, right? Right. But that's different too. So you got instilling fear, encouraging you to do worship, attributes of Allah. All that is in the Quran, right? So the Quran is a mixture of all these different things. And then some of them are legal rulings, right? Creedal things, all that's in the Quran, right? So the one who's going to give legal rulings, let me help you. Since we're having this conversation, that lets us know, and we're answering and we're trying to figure it out, that lets us know we're not qualified to extract rulings from the Quran. Will we already agree from that, from just this surface touching of the subject, will we agree that none of us are qualified to extract legal rulings from the Quran. Would we agree with that? Does anyone dispute that here? We ain't even warm up. We just started. So we would know that none of us, not one of us in here, unless we hide in the sheikh, you know, you got those big scholars who don't speak and they just stay behind and watch, right? I'm talking about the ones who's talking. All of us are not qualified to extract nothing from the Quran. So we don't even know what a proof is, let alone to use it, right? All right, so at least we're far ahead of the game. I don't have to convince you that you're not a jurist or a qualified legal scholar. That we don't got to be convinced of that. You already realize that. So good, we're far ahead of the game. Tayyip. So in order to get a proof from the Quran, you need to know what verses, what they are, what type of verses, and what they apply to. So that's one step. So we wipe out the Quran, and I think I can do the Sunnah real quick. We're kind of out of time. That means when I say we wipe out the Quran, I mean we understand that we're not qualified to deduce rulings from the Quran. Let me stay there, right? Are all the verses in the Quran explicit by themselves without any further details, qualifications, or conditions? I repeat, are all the verses in the Quran clear without any further detail, qualifications, or exceptions, or conditions? That's a question. So that means any verse, I can read it and it's just as it is. I don't need nothing else. Are all the verses in the Quran like that? So the next question comes, since you all said no, 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 how does one determine which verses are clear and explicit and which verses have conditions, qualifications, or require further details to understand? How we know that? Because you said that, so they're not all clear. So that means we have to know which ones are clear and which ones require further informations. Muhkamat means clear. It only has one meaning. And Shaquille, it can't bear another possibility. So how do we know which one verses are like that? So for instance, you have verses that are absolute, verses that are conditioned, verses that are general, verses that are specific, verses that are abrogating, verses that are abrogated. How are we going to know that? Excuse me. How are we going to know that? That's a question. I'm just giving us to think. That's all. I'm going to give you all these answers, but I want us to think first. Yeah, man, I'm just drinking my coffee. It's dripping all over the place. I'm a mess. Seeking the people of knowledge. Okay. These are not trap. These are thinking questions to make you think. So don't think I'm like, I'm stunting on you or anything. No, I'm just making you think. Stuff you already know, you just don't think about. You already know what I'm saying to you. And normally you live your life like this. But some so-called Salafi and this Wahhabi movement told you you're a scholar. And you believed it. And you start acting like that. Even though you, by your nature, you know better, but they convince you to that, right? You don't need no sheikh, you a sheikh. And you know daggone well you ain't nowhere near no sheikh, right? But then they start showing you to act like one, right? So I see different questions, right? Different answers. So what you all realize is that you're going to require a teacher, right? To explain all these details to you. Would we always agree? That we agree that we understand to get this, we're going to need a teacher. We can't do it ourselves. We do agree with that, right? Y'all with me? This is back and forth. We're engaging one another. So, and I need you to do something. Take good notes. Follow what I'm saying. Because everything I'm saying, one thing is going to build on another thing, is going to build on another thing till we get to the final result. Have any of you ever studied logic? Have any of you ever studied logic? None of you never studied? Teresa, is that yes for you study logic or no? Has anyone of you studied logic a little? Yes? Okay. Can any of you give me the basic structure of logic to its smallest breakdown? What is the structure of logic? In other words, how does logic work? So that's the structure. In its simplest form, when I want to know something is logical, how do I get to that? Yes, mental. How do I get to that? What is it built upon? Anyone know? So you say you study logic. You should, it's important. Does anyone know? I like to engage just so we can follow. And in Islamic studies, you need logic. You need logic. Right. An argument and a conclusion, right? That's true. But Malika, before with the argument is built on something, right? Before you get to a conclusion and the argument, but the argument must be built on something. What is the argument built on? What is the argument built upon? So before you get to a conclusion and you have an argument that leads to that conclusion, that argument must be built on something. An idea or a premise, right? It's built on different premises, right? This leads to this. And from all this, we get this conclusion, right? Give you an example. We're talking about, we just did a logical argument that comes up to the conclusion that we're not qualified to deduce anything from the Quran. What premise did we build that argument upon to get to that conclusion? The conclusion was none of us is qualified to deduce anything from the Quran. And we had an argument for that was built on a premise. What was that premise? Anyone know? Y'all didn't follow the premise? She said, man, I need coffee. The premise was, among them, there were several premises. There was more than one, but the main premise was, you don't even know the types of verses in the Quran or which ones they are. So if that's the premise. So if on that, there's no way you're going to distinguish the evidences of the Quran because you don't even know the types of the verses. So hence, you don't know the types of the verses. So therefore, you cannot distinguish what types of verses. So there is no way you're going to extract anything. There's the premise. Here's the argument. There's the conclusion. That's logic. Do you follow? In the basic form. And that is a dalil, which is called a dalil al-aqli. That's an intellectual evidence. And it's a hujjah, it's a proof. And we all accept it, don't we? Does anyone disagree with that logic I just gave you? Oh, we got to get ready to stop. Man, this stuff gets fun. She said, and we are the proof of that logic. Y'all want to learn the deen. This is part of the deen. I know they didn't tell us in Wahhabi class this stuff, right? They just said Quran and Sunnah, that's all you need. No, you need a brain, right? You need a brain. You can't just follow Quran and Sunnah without intellect. It doesn't work. You're going to confuse the Quran and the Sunnah. You need an intellect. It's important. It's part of the religion. In fact, the Quran and the Sunnah tell you to use your intellect. All right, we're going to pause there because we got to go to post-Fajr reflections. Tomorrow we'll come back. So I need you to be able to break all this down. I'm going to ask you about this tomorrow. So because we're building so that you understand. Without building this, it's going to be difficult to explain anything. But once you understand these things, it's easy to keep us in our place. So we'll stop here and we'll go to post-Fajr reflections. Barakallahu fikum. Take good notes. Go back, look at what I said, write it down. Tomorrow's going to be much more heavy. You're going to add more, so you got to get today, please. Every day we're doing this, I'm building on something, so you have to take good notes. And I didn't even give you the dalil for what I'm saying yet. Because you have to understand before you get dalil. Then when we get dalil, you'll understand and you can understand dalil because that requires you to memorize things. All right. Barakallahu fikum. I'll see y'all I'll see you in the post-Fajr reflection. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.